Mr. Evelyn?
Here.
Mr. Tiller?
Here.
Ms. Page?
Here.
Mr. Steers?
Here.
And Mr. Lockwood?
Here.
Well, thank you all for being here, all of you employees of New Kent County. Item 1 on the agenda, emergency generator replacement, Dairy Queen SPS standby generator. Mr. Mike Lang.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Come before you this morning to request an appropriation. We have a generator that was scheduled for replacement in FY24, so approximately July, but every time it runs, we continue to get a failure for water in the engine compartment, which is a pretty bad sign that failure is imminent. So based on the age of the generator, we do not recommend repair. Replacement would be the more cost-effective option. And other than that, recommend replacing it now because we would have to have a rental standby unit on site until we got the replacement in there, which could cost upwards of $10,000 to $12,000, I believe.
For the rental?
Yes, and then we'd end up with the same cost to replace in 4 months. So we're here to ask for a supplemental appropriation of $80,000, sort of an advance on next year's CIP. So we would deduct this from the CIP in FY24.
I can't imagine there's anything like not having power for a lengthy amount of time, especially businesses.
It's a critical piece of infrastructure, and it does serve the VDOT rest areas, which are, as you know, very busy and also part of the state hurricane evacuation route. So if it went bad, it would go bad quickly.
Especially during a hurricane.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. I'm still thinking about all the things we can say about that. Any other comments? Or?
I think it's a no-brainer.
Okay. Anybody else?
No. Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Lockwood, thank you.
I move to appropriate $80,000 from the utility fund for immediate replacement of the Dairy Queen SPS standby generator.
Thank you, Mr. Lockwood. Ms. Watkins, would you poll the members, please?
Mr. Evelyn?
Aye.
Ms. Page?
I have a question.
Okay.
Suppose it's more than $80,000. So do we want to do 80,000, or would we want to do
Whatever it takes.
We have the quote on the generator. We have the quote to install, and 80,000 includes
I just want to make
a nice
sure we have
buffer.
to-
But we'll only spend what we need, of course.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Steers?
Aye.
Mr. Lockwood?
Aye.
And Mr. Tiller?
Aye. Thank you, Mr. Lang.
Thank you all.
Next on the agenda is adoption of resolution R-06-23, multi-state opioid settlements with Teva, Allergan, Walmart, CVS, and Walgreens. Are they all here?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. We've recently received notice from the Attorney General's office that there's been another recent settlement regarding the entities that you've just mentioned. We don't know how much money would New Kent receive at this point. That will be dependent on the number of localities across the state and really across the country that participate in the settlement. There is a deadline of April 18th to notify the Attorney General's office who will be participating in it. The Attorney General, in turn, will notify, I believe, the attorney that's filing suit against these entities. And then the money will be distributed based on their participating localities. So it's to be determined as far as how much we will receive on that. We do have until April 18th to notify the Attorney General's office. The action that you have before you this morning is to authorize the county attorney, and I'm going to ask that you add in the motion or county administrator to sign any required documentation notifying the state that they will participate, that New Kent will participate in the settlement.
How much have we received in the past?
About 30,000. Yeah.
Anybody else have any questions for Mr. Hathaway or the attorney? Again, I'm going to agree with Mr. Steers on this one. This is a no-brainer as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, that money has to be used towards drug rehab, right? I mean, you can't put it in your payroll.
That's
Right.
correct.
Okay.
And so the settlement is $20 billion, and it looks like $17 billion would be distributed. Is that over that 10-year period that the distributions would occur?
Yes.
Okay.
We're not going to get a lump sum payment. It will be broken up over the 10-year period.
Oh, it looks like some of them even over 15 years. Walgreens.
Yeah, that's
So this
correct.
could be going on for a while. It's not going to be like a windfall. It's going to be something coming in.
Yeah.
Okay.
It'll be
That means the lawyer made $3 billion? Wow.
You don't get paid till they get paid.
Yeah, really. But he's not waiting 10 years. Oh, I'm on the record here. Okay. Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Lockwood.
if there is no further discussion or questions, I move to adopt Resolution R-06-23, approving the county's proposed settlement of opioid-related claims against Teva, Allergan, Walmart, Walgreens, CVS, and their related corporate entities, and directing the county attorney or county administrator to execute the documents necessary to effectuate the county's participation in the settlement. You can tell a lawyer wrote that.
Thank you, Mr. Lockwood. Ms. Watkins, would you poll the members, please?
Ms. Page?
Aye.
Mr. Steers?
Aye.
Mr. Lockwood?
Aye.
Mr. Evelyn? And Mr. Tiller?
Aye. Moving along. Item number 3, approval of communications tower agreement with the United States Department of Commerce. Mr. Hathaway.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. As you are aware, the county owns a communications tower. Near our trash transfer station. Currently, there are no users on the tower, but we have an agreement that you have before you. The agreement is between the U.S. Department of Commerce, but we're actually working with the National Weather Service for the installation of weather equipment on that tower. We're proposing not to charge monthly or annual lease. We're offering free space, but in return, the benefit to the county is that we will get the services provided by the radio equipment that's going to be installed on the tower. Currently, there's a gap, and if you have a weather radio, it probably doesn't work very well right now. There's a gap in service between Williamsburg and Henrico. The equipment being installed on this tower will fill that gap, so therefore we will be able to receive the information on our weather radios once the equipment is installed. So that's the benefit to New Kent and New Kent's residents. And you have a copy of the proposed lease in front of you. There are a couple of areas highlighted in red. Those are changes, minor changes that are being requested by the county. That if this is approved, we will request the Department of Commerce to make.
Mr. Hathaway, or Mr. Chairman. So, is this for the collection of data or just a transfer of signal, like a repeater?
I believe it's more the transfer of signal or repeater. There may be some data collection installed on this. Chief Opeta saying no.
Okay.
So it's just a transfer.
Okay.
But it will still allow us for future growth if needed for the sheriff's department or emergency services?
Yeah, I think
For
it
an
would be
antenna?
a big benefit. As far as additional space on the tower, yes.
Right, okay.
This will be the only tenant on that tower, and there is additional space on there.
And if I read correctly, they're paying for the installation and upkeep of everything, so.
Yes, we're not charging them, but there should be no additional costs on our behalf either. They're responsible for the maintenance of their equipment as well as the installation.
Mr. Lockwood, you want 3 for 3?
Chairman.
Mr. Evelyn, go
Yeah.
ahead.
Well, is there any other discussion, concerns? If not, I move to approve the communications tower agreement with the United States Department of Commerce.
Thank you, Mr. Evelyn. Ms. Watkins, would you poll the members, please?
Mr. Steers?
Aye.
Mr. Lockwood?
Aye.
Mr. Evelyn?
Aye.
Ms. Page? And Mr. Tiller?
Aye. Moving right along. Item 4, SAFER Grant, authorization to write, Fire Chief Rick Opet. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman, good morning, members of the board, Mr. Hathaway. This morning, I come to you granting or seeking permission to write a SAFER grant. It's that time of the year. The grant actually opened up last February 13th, and it closes on the 17th of March. The anticipated award for this is anywhere from June 2nd all the way to September 30th, which ends their fiscal year of 23. This year in the SAFER, again, as of last year, there's no match, so it's 3-year free funding after a 180-day recruitment period. What I've got in front of you there is a little timeline that if we were to be awarded on July 1, and we just took this as an example, any time for that period but July 1, there would be a recruitment period from July 1 to January 1. And the period of performance for that first year would start on January 2nd, which falls within the FY24 fiscal year for New Kent County. January 3rd through July 31st would be our recruit training for firefighter, EMT, paramedic. And then August 24 to October 24, we would conduct our recruit in-field training to get those folks up to where they needed to be before they're out in the field. And then October to November 24, we would be staffing the newly opened Station 6. And that's the whole premise behind this request for the SAFER is to staff the newly opened Station 6 if the board chooses to move forward in this year's budget. January 2nd of 2025 would start the second period of performance, followed by January 2nd of 2026 would be the third year, and that would be the end of the grant. And then on January 2nd of 2027, that's where our period of performance ends and the county funding commences on January 2027, just using this model here if we were to be awarded July 1. The total firefighter request to do so, it is pretty large. It is 18 firefighters, and this is 6 firefighters per shift, and that's cross-staffed in the following manner. It's 3 firefighters cross-staffed daily on an engine and a medic, and 3 firefighters cross-staff daily on a ladder and a medic. So really, we're putting up 2 ambulances down at that station for the volume, and then we staff an engine and a ladder when that's needed. Currently, if you look at the next page, you'll see a heat map that we came up using the data from last calendar year. And what you see there, the heat map, is kind of the hot spots in the county right now that's driving the volume in the county. Obviously, it's the western part of the county, more so in that Quinton area, and even all the way from the Quinton area up here to the courthouse area is where we're really seeing a draw for services. What we're trying to accomplish here with this, if the Bottoms Bridge station moves forward, we're historically now handling multiple calls in the western end of the county. As we know, Talliesville is booming pretty big right now, and those subdivisions, especially the retired communities, we're finding ourselves in those communities with ambulances a lot. And what this is creating is kind of pretty much a Ventura effect, where we're pulling assets from the eastern end of the county all the way in here, and that causes a lot of issues. Obviously, it empties the eastern end of the county, and it also provides a very long response time, especially when you're pulling assets from Lenexa coming down the Bottoms Bridge, or even Eltham coming down. Another consideration that we're looking at, and one of the reasons for this, is the timing of this, especially if we move forward with the new station, is going to line up right with the construction of I-64, of filling that gap. And we anticipate a big spike in calls during that time period. We reached out to some of our colleagues in Newport News and James City and see what they were thrown when they had the construction, and they had challenges because it is going to be limited access. And what this would do, this would allow us to handle pretty much everything on the eastern end of, when I say the 205, pretty much up to the 211, with this station and with this staffing alone, pretty much leaving the other stations, in service if something would happen. And we know there's going to be a lot of diversions, a lot of craziness going to happen over the next 3 years while they expand that interstate. So if you take a look at the amount of what this equates to, is anywhere from 1.3 to 1.4 million based on full-time salary and benefits. And this estimated range takes into consideration ALS incentives and potential salary increases that are in line for the budget. So that is our request to go ahead. Remember, this is just a request to write the grant. If we were to be awarded, we would have to come before you all to accept the grant. So that's kind of our request right now, is to write the grant for 18 firefighters. And that's what I'm looking for today.
If we move forward with this, we're still looking at leaving Station 2 open for the time being?
That's correct.
For
yes.
additional help?
Yes,
even
we looked at
Talliesville and Bottoms
kind of
Bridge?
combining it, but with, again, the anticipated growth on Airport Road in the Tunstall area and the Rochambeau area. It's just the response times, need that Quinton station to be open.
And I did get some numbers from Ms. LeDuc in planning, and we know Bottoms Bridge is growing faster than anywhere, because you can look at the maps over the last 12 years and how District 2 has actually shrunk in size. And in between just the very western end of Mr. Steers' district on Old Roxbury Road, and that part of yours, Mr. Steers, because it goes around to Woodhaven. There's four subdivisions, not subdivisions, but the apartments at Cumberland, Liberty Landing, PUD, Whitehall, Robbins, the large lot subdivision, and then that's Woods Edge. We're looking at right at 650 new residential
How many
only.
is in Liberty Landing?
290.
That hadn't been approved yet?
No, but I think they're going to be here next month for a presentation. I know the attorney had asked me about coming in and doing a presentation to the planning commission pretty soon, and the board as well.
Are there any proffers in that for the new fire station that we're gonna need due to all this growth?
Currently, the developer has not proffered anything towards the new fire station.
They've offered some preliminary numbers for the townhomes and the single-family homes.
Yeah, right now it's just a cash proffer and a commitment to build a certain amount of commercial development.
All right, maybe this is an attorney question. If they don't designate that cash proffer to where it goes, can we make the decision on where that cash goes, where it can be used?
Yeah, if it's just general fund dollars, you can decide where to spend that.
Unless they say we want it to go to what they can determine that as well, though, couldn't they? They could say we want, if it's $8,000, they could say 2 here, 2 there, 4 there, whatever. They can.
Yeah, essentially it depends on the language and what they're proffering. But if they just say it's a cash payment, then it would be unrestricted and would go to the general fund, and you could spend it how you want. I haven't seen their proffer yet, so I don't know what restrictions they've proposed.
Mr. Chairman?
Yep.
A few comments. First of all, I know y'all had a busy few weeks. 3. So I know a couple of them were in my district, and y'all got there in time. Just thank you and all the firefighters and EMTs out there. It's working for the county. They did a great job, sounds like. Second, I guess in 2008, what did we have? Roughly six firefighters, a couple of admin. 2016 now. No, 2023. I'm sorry. I've been here 16 years. We're up to 60. Sorry, I got to crack me up. 60 or so plus employees with the fire and rescue is something I'm very proud of, because obviously my family has used you a bunch of times. But to me here today, I think we're putting the cart before the horse. I mean, we don't even have a piece of land designated yet. It hadn't passed the budget. I'm not saying it's not going to, but it's in the budget like you mentioned earlier. So, and who knows how long it's going to take to build the fire station. And I know SAFER grants come up every year, but I feel like we need to get this process a little bit farther down the road before we jump into 18 firefighters. Obviously, I'm sure we need a few more. I like the idea of 6 firefighters, EMTs in the Bonds Bridge area, because that is obviously very hot zone. So I just have a little concern about supporting this, because if we're going to write it, I feel like we need to accept it if we're going to take it, because we got ourselves in trouble one time before. So if I'm going to support it, I'm going to accept it if we get it awarded. But that's just my stance.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Ms. Page.
I guess since with the farms of New Kent and the communities that I have in District 3, that to complete one community would probably be more than the other communities that was listed. I guess it's because of my mouth that we are widening I-64 through the I-20, through the 29 gap. I'm taking all of that into consideration. However, I don't understand 18 firefighters, 6 per shift. I don't know how we got here. I don't know. I look at when we talk about the need, and I see the maps and I see the pings, and I guess I need to apologize for having age-restricted communities. I guess all of that along goes along with the fact that when this came up, it was we're going to need to come out of Fire Station 2. Now then we were going to use the other fire stations as a model, which there can't be because, to a certain degree, because it'll have to be a bigger station. We went from 6 to 12 to now 18 firefighters where we're going to have daily cross training. Okay, I understand the need. I've had the opportunity to ride in limousines, so I understand all of that. However, I can't support it today. I think that with everything that legislation has said, to include this morning about struggles that families are going through the economy since COVID, with upcoming issues, with us being so very proud of not increasing income taxes or tax rates in our county, and then to say that we got to pull money from somewhere to pay for them. And I hate the word free because free is not free. It never has been, and it's not going to be. So eventually, we're going to pay for them. And so, with all of that being said, and the long and the short of it is, I can't support a grant for a department for 18 new employees, and we have not even had our budget retreat. We know that as we talk about how fast our county is growing, that every department, I believe Mr. Hathaway has submitted for personnel requests. If not, there are very few that have not submitted for that. And so with that being said, I think that it would be to the interest of my concerned constituents that stretch from Burnsville to 612, that we would wait and take a better, do another evaluation on a submission for a safer grant. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Lockwood.
Chief Opet, I'm curious, is there a minimum number of people you can apply for the SAFER grant?
There certainly is. However, to write a grant that gets to be in a high award category, you have to go in versus and writing it towards the NFPA standard that we're working towards. So we would have to find that number that says, hey, this meets that NFPA standard. In our case here, I think 12 would be that to make it a high quality grant to be awarded for the NFPA requirements to make that. So I think the answer to your question is yes, 12 would be kind of the minimum that would give our grant even a look to be awarded.
Because I have a hard time with these huge leaps as well. Looking at $1.5 million hit down the road. I know that if we could put more people in existing stations, would that help solve the problem with keeping units online or available? Or is that something that we're going to pull everybody out of a station to go hit, obviously a structure fire or something like that, I can understand, but the run-of-the-mill, if there is ever such a thing, ambulance run, we're talking 2 people, right? Leaves 2.
Correct. Yes,
so
sir. Yes, sir.
If we put a couple more in a station, does it leave?
It certainly does. It certainly does. With the stations that we have right now, 1, 3, 5, and obviously once 4 is complete, we do have that capacity. We're out of capacity at the Quinton Station, so I think hence the request for the new one moving forward. But certainly, to answer your question, putting more folks in existing stations, that certainly helps, absolutely.
But 12 is our kind of minimum for a safer grant to have a chance.
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
And then,
I was just asking Mr. Hathaway, if you did award at 18, how would it impact the budget? How would you account for it? If you had time to look for that.
Well, since the county's responsibility would come year 4 and 5, I would recommend to the board that we begin in next year's budget by setting aside a penny, and we continue to do that each year. I calculated that we would need 4 pennies to fully fund the firefighter position. So for the next 4 years, if we set aside an additional penny, year 5, when we're fully responsible for the total cost, we would have the money set aside to pay for it. So it unfortunately would involve a potential tax increase, but that would be my recommendation to pay for it.
And that's a penny at today's rate.
Yes.
And that, go ahead, Mr. Steers, I'll follow up.
Oh, that's okay. First of all, Chief, I wanted to tell you I appreciate your aggressiveness. You always are on the ball, moving forward, and that's what I like about you. But that 1.4 also is not the whole picture. This is just for staffing. So the whole picture is probably going to be double that by the time you start putting in the apparatus. Am I right? Or is it going to be more than that?
I think what you're looking at, I think in the budget right now we have, for the new budget, I believe Mr. Hathaway's right around. Well, no. What I'm talking about is the new station. So if you take a look at the new station, I think it's right at $7 million. I think $7 million. And then now today's prices, and I'm almost embarrassed to say this, but we're probably looking to almost close to $3 million on the apparatus when it's all said and done. And I'm not very happy about that, but for those of you who know what's going on in the big truck industry, it's not fun at all by any means. And I'm very concerned, deeply concerned for the future in that aspect. But so you're looking at, $10 million in capital improvements, and then this is your ongoing.
Right. Okay.
Yes.
I do appreciate that. But I tend to also agree that maybe we should let's put it on the back burner for right now. We've got to find the property. We've got to find, exactly how we're going to pay for it and stuff like that. And if I may, on a separate note, when's the last time the county had an ISO rating? Hadn't that been several years?
Yeah, our last ISO rating, I believe, was in 2014. It went into effect. We were going to wait to see what happens with Station 6 because I think Station 6 would certainly improve leaps and bounds.
Right.
Once that would go in,
and
how we deploy those personnel.
With the new Station 4, that wouldn't affect it, you wouldn't think, the new location?
A little bit.
Yeah.
A little bit. It depends on how we deploy the staffing because that's the key there is deploying the staffing model. It's one of the critical elements in there.
So you're tending to want to wait till after Station 6 is built?
That would be my recommendation.
Okay. Thank you.
So I don't understand because I have constituents at Idens Cross and their rating didn't change. I was listening to what you said.
The ISO rating?
But at Idens Cross and their rating didn't change. And we have station, we have 5 over there.
Well, my experience in the past when we went through this in 2014 was the constituent needs to contact their insurance company because the insurance company's not going to call you and go, guess what? You got a cheaper rate coming, but you go and Rick Opet was very instrumental in getting flyers out to all the residents explaining how the process worked and everything. And I know I had many people in my district with huge savings, $800, $1,200 a year on homeowners insurance.
Absolutely. Same
And-
thing to this effect.
That's kind of the little caveat that the taxpayers get back from investing all this money in building new fire stations.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, if I may too, and I'll use some of your words that you love. It's trickery, right? The insurance companies, if they see this, right, they'll move too quickly other model real quick, and it's basically shopping around your insurance rate at that point, because those insurance that they like to play the games of, oh, so they went down, so then they go into, oh, fire loss in your county. And then we use that model, or they use another model. So, like Mr. Steers said, is you really have to go and shop that rate into the community. But it's trickeration, as Ms. Page usually is what they use.
Nothing's changed, so I still use it.
And I had constituents who said that the insurance agent said they had the best rate, and they said, well, they're going to go out and shop around. And they go, well, let us look at it, and we'll get back with you. And they actually came back the next day or so.
Yeah,
I mean,
I've had them. I've had. That has been my recommendation to shop your insurance.
Right.
So I was just asking since it had come up.
Anybody else?
But since I do say the mic's still on. I do think that, and I might be incorrect, but it would be better for us not to apply and wait to apply versus applying and then receiving the grant and turning the grant down. Or am I incorrect?
I agree, Mr. Evelyn, that if we apply for it and we get it, we're going to take it. I would say we should do that. I remember one time there was a supervisor said, well, go ahead and apply for it, and maybe we won't get it. But
I guess my biggest fear on all of this is because what's actually happened in my end of the county over the last 10 days. And I mean, within 6 days, 2 house fires burned completely to the ground. And I can't imagine anything worse than losing everything that you own. And the second one, I think they actually lost 2 vehicles in that fire as well as the house. And for too long, I feel like we keep putting it off. If we don't get a grant and we build a station and we need 12, or whether it's 12 or 18 people, then we got to come up with the full salary to start with. It's not, I just think we've been reactive way too long. I mean, I would like, if not the 18, I'd like to at least see the 12. Worst case scenario. We can't keep saying what if in 5 years, what if in 4 years. We know, and Mr. Hathaway said, maybe 4 pennies on the tax rate, but we know AutoZone is coming. They've started, and what's their projected revenue from AutoZone on an annual basis?
Not much the first 10 years.
Well, I know it's not much the first 10 years, but it's revenue, which could prevent yet a tax increase, whether it's a penny's worth of revenue or 5 pennies worth of revenue each year. I just feel like we're being, like I said, these houses are more than likely, well, we know all but 290 out of that 650 are coming. They've already started working on one of these subdivisions already, or 2 of them. They're already clearing for the apartments in Cumberland, and I just noticed today on Roxbury, the large lot subdivision, they're starting to work there. We can't keep saying what if, because what if is just, I don't know. We can't keep saying, let's wait 5 years. We can't say, let's wait till the next one. The next one may not come along. We don't know. The grants come out every year. Gee, they do? Okay. So if we wait another year and then we decide then, it may not be a 3-year free ride. And I know you're right, Mr. Steers, nothing's free, or whoever said that. I get that. But still, it's non-salary for us for 3 years. I just don't understand why we have to keep saying what if in 2027 or 2028. I think we need to move, and I think this is actually the right time, especially with the interstate that's coming, that's widening. And I know last weekend, Henrico County helped us in more ways than one last Sunday. 4 calls, they handled 3 EMT calls for us during that house fire, and then they actually manned Station 2 while we were in UA for that afternoon. So we can't keep depending on Henrico, James City, West Point, Hanover County, all these, we do it all the time. And we can't keep depending on them, because one day it's going to come back to bite us, and y'all all know what that bite is going to be. So I hope y'all reconsider this. I really do. I just can't. I feel like we can't keep putting this off year after year. I think last year, the 12, I think we messed up when we didn't take that grant. I really do. So that's my 2 cents worth.
Chair, when was you brought in, 8 or 10, 12 recruits last year? Was
2 years ago.
Was that 2 years ago?
I think the big one was, because that 3 years ago, because that grant is ending this fiscal year, so.
So that grant's ending?
Yes.
But, and were they the last hires?
Yes.
They had? So,
12.
Correct.
but still, I would, with all due respect, I feel like we have done a lot for the fire station with the 2 new fire stations that we built in the last 4 or 5 years. Everybody can always, need help. I definitely understand that, but I just don't feel like we have a good concrete plan yet with the building and stuff. I'd like to be, when this building is approved, or if it is approved in the budget, where it's going to be, it could affect how many firefighters we do need. I mean, who knows about Quentin? We've talked about that back and forth. Who knows what the economy is going to be? So, I just feel like we're putting the cart before the horse.
So, Mr. Chair, I guess at one time I could tell you I wasn't proud of it, but this time I am. I think sitting up here, I'm probably the longest reigning resident of New Kent. And so I remember what if we didn't have a sheriff, but we had one. I remember what if we didn't have a fire department and we got 6 volunteers. I remember that. I watched very carefully. I watched very carefully our surrounding news, and I talk weekly with our regions, and it appears that almost whenever we have an increased number of fires or accidents, that our surrounding localities have the same thing. This weekend in Richmond, I don't know if it was 2 or 3 fires. We don't even want to talk about the other goings on in our sheriff and police department and our surrounding localities. But I can tell you this, I can say that through my life here, I can't say that we've been dragging anything down the road. Maybe we didn't push as fast or hard as we could have pushed, but I don't think that we were dragging. And I think that we had the responsibility not only to save a house, because I don't care how many firefighters, how many EMTs, how many sheriff deputies we have, there's always going to be a one or one if we had of. And so, and prayerfully it won't, but it's always that possibility. And so I think that to say that we would be dragging our feet not to apply for 12 firefighters or even to apply for a safer grant this year, I don't think that this statement is in context at all.
Mr. Chairman, if I may. Ladies and gentlemen of the board, I appreciate your comments and your concerns, and they're concerns of mine as well. And Mr. Steers, I appreciate your comment of me thinking forward, because that's who I am. And my goal is to make sure that this county stays out of trouble. And as you know, my goal is not to pressure the board by any means. That's not what I'm here to do. But I am concerned, and my two colleagues in the back of the room, our job on a daily basis is getting very difficult. We're holding the department together with super glue, and we have to keep on applying super glue right now every day. And my fear is that super glue is going to start pulling apart at a very fast pace. So my goal up here is not just to throw people in firehouses, and I've heard it before, I'm trying to build a destiny. Trust me, I'd be happier with one station with 4 people with 1 square mile. But at the end of the day, what we're seeing out there, what my colleague Sheriff McLaughlin is seeing out there on a daily basis, we have passed that growth plan. And it's my concern that we're going to have some issues in the future. And Ms. Page, I understand it's always just one. There's always that one. But it's every day now. It's starting to be every day at a higher rate. So that is my concern that I want to voice out to you all.
Thank you, Chief. Anybody else have any questions?
I just have one more comment, if I may. I certainly acknowledge what you said there, Chief, and I think that despite that, we are, to me, putting the cart before the horse and with this request. But I would say that it would be maybe in everybody's best interest to take another look as we're going into the budget year and the budget requests, to see about the prospect of putting some more guys in existing stations. We've got time to discuss that, in this current budget cycle before we get into a commitment mode. And I think that would maybe help alleviate some of the stresses that your folks are feeling and not take such a huge leap at this time. So if I would just put that out there as a recommendation as we go into the budget discussions. Thank you.
Excuse me.
Go ahead.
Chief, will there be another application time frame this year?
Not this year. It'll open up this time next year.
Okay, so you only have one.
I
thought
let
one
me
year.
say there's an if, because this is the last year in the federal government's, but that this budget's in there. But my assumption is they're going to re-up the money. I don't know what the House and everybody's going to do with their budget, but this is the last year that this is funded before they have to resubmit whatever they need to submit in the government budget.
I remember one year though they had another application in the fall, didn't they? That two in 1 year.
I can't recall, but maybe.
Long time ago.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
And Chief Opet, I'd like to add too, it seems like from year to year the terms of the Safer Grant are subject to change too, because there's been some years it's just been 3 years. Some years it might have just been 2, so that's subject to change too.
Correct.
Well, we have it has to be submitted by the 17th, right? So we do have one other meeting prior to that. Just keep that in mind.
Something else I want to keep in mind too is that, excuse me, Mr. Chair, is that, and I've heard this come up several times, is that we have, right now, we have an orange stream of funding, and that orange stream of funding has been designated. And so it's my understanding that the only way that we could cautiously and move forward would be to set aside additional tax funds.
That would be my recommendation if we were awarded the SAFER grant, so that by year 5, when it becomes the county's responsibility, we're not hit with coming up with the full $1.4 million.
All right, I have a question. And I'm going to actually ask this of Mr. Lockwood. When you said something about possibly adding more staff, how many people are you thinking about? I'm just wondering.
I'm not picking a number, Mr. Chairman. I'm just saying that, this is the time for us to be discussing that as we move forward with the new budget. So I would leave that open to discussion at this point. And, if we're going to rely on it being fully funded by the county as opposed to a SAFER grant, then it would have to work within our constraints that, currently exist. So I would say, let's talk about where we would need additional support to keep units online longer, and see what it would take in the way of personnel to accomplish that. So I don't have an answer or a number for you, Mr. Chairman, other than let's leave it all open to discussion, because now is that time to have those discussions. And I would also say, in regards to that, we really should be looking at, future growth and what it's going to take, whether there's a SAFER grant available or not, whether it's 2 years or 5 years. If there is, there obviously is a need. So, maybe we should be looking at that set aside now as we go forward, regardless of picking a number or applying for a SAFER grant. And let's, like you said, let's not have it pushed down the road. Let's have the resources to do it when the time comes. And I think that would be, that would be wise for us to, again, during this time of discussion about budgets, to be looking at those possibilities.
And Mr. Lockwood, Mr. Chairman, if I may, we've put a request in for 6 firefighters in this budget, and that was to add 2 folks per shift at the Lenexa station.
Any other questions? So who wants to step out on the limb and make this motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we defer the authorization to write the SAFER grant to until a later date to be announced.
Ms. Watkins, would you poll the members?
Mr. Lockwood,
Aye.
Mr. Evelyn,
Aye.
Ms. Page, Mr. Steers,
Aye.
and Mr. Tiller.
No. Next on the agenda, thank you, Chief. Do I? Yeah. Take a short break here. Thank you. Coming back to order, to open session. Next item on the agenda, item 5, transient occupancy and food and beverage tax code correction. Commissioner of Revenue, Mrs. Laura Shimovic, and Treasurer, Mr. Evelyn. Thank you.
I think it's pretty clear the request that we've made. Charles and I kind of came up with this together when we noticed there were some issues. Number one, our transient occupancy tax code is completely out of date. In the last 2 or 3 years, there's been a lot of change in the state tax code regarding the intermediaries or the Airbnbs and their responsibilities in reporting, and we don't even have a definition for them in there. They're not in the older code. After the last few years, I've really been having to follow the state code as it is in conflict with our current code, not even addressing some new responsibilities of the different. So I think on transient occupancy, that's the major issue. And then in the meals tax code, we found some additional conflicts, and I'll let the treasurer talk about his issues with the way our penalties and interest were put in there.
Yeah, thank you, Laura. The meals tax had a really not conventional penalty structure in it. It had a 10% penalty that was assessed right after the day after the due date. Then it had another 10% penalty after 30 days late, and another 10% penalty after 60 days late. And our system cannot calculate that correctly. We tried every way we can, and it just makes a tracking problem. It's really, really hard to do, trying to get all those meals tax tickets and which one is late and which one corresponds with the month and how late they are. So the proposed ordinance, and Laura did most of the work on this, I'll give her that credit, this really simplifies everything as far as penalty and interest goes. It's just if they don't file their paperwork by the due date, the commissioner assesses a 10% penalty. If they don't pay by the first of the month after the due date, then they start receiving an interest of 10% annual percentage rate. And I know it's a lot more in especially the transient occupancy that has to do with Laura, but as far as my office goes, penalty and interest was the biggest thing we were worried about. And this really clears up a lot.
Might I add for clarification that this actually reduces penalty and interest, because what it really basically wanted me to do is the day after it was due, not in, 10% penalty, tell Charles it's late, 10% penalty, and then a continuation of that penalty. And in any conventional tax structure, you do not see anything that severe on a penalty for late payments. So this is suggesting just one penalty in my office because I know when it's received, and that for Charles to start on interest if it's not paid for.
What a question. On the meals tax, if habitual offenders, if that's what you want to call them, on not paying meals tax, instead of just adding on that 10%, can we pull their license to operate for 10 days if they don't pay within so many days, and maybe that would get their attention if they couldn't operate for a week or so?
I don't know if that makes an impact on them or not. I mean, you'd have to actually go and close their doors versus saying, I just revoke your license. I can do that. I can revoke their license. And technically, the way it's written up, if you're not in compliance, your license is no good. So taking that piece of paper, I'm not sure it's going to be effective. And whether they're filing, I mean, some people file and then they don't pay. So sometimes they're actually two separate issues. And to be clear, you know, the meals and the transient occupancy tax is held in trust. we as consumers are all charged that up front. The businesses are collecting it, so this is not actually coming out of there. There are collector, just like the sales tax is collected by food and other industries to remit to the state. So this is kind of a trust tax. And the trust tax, there's really no reason for them not to be paying. It's like an embezzlement of sorts.
Yes, if they collect that from the consumers and they don't turn it over to us, they can be held criminally responsible for that as well. And it is embezzlement.
Yeah.
I think that's right.
I think that's the word that's used in the code. Because it's really not coming out of their funds, it's on top of their funds. But what we're suggesting really isn't, first of all, the transient and occupancy tax is completely out of, as you can see, it's almost completely rewritten because it's almost completely rewritten at the state level. It includes, and I expect there to be minor changes as we go forward because there's some resistance from the intermediaries or from one. So I expect there's to be some additional language added later, but that would be more of a simple change because our code looks nothing like it. But the suggestion for the new penalties and interest, like Charles said, our system won't even do what it asks to do, and it's pretty excessive. And even looking at any of the surrounding counties, I couldn't find anything that compared to that sort of penalty.
No, and I can't find anything either. This is really unique to New Kent.
Well, plus they wanted 2 penalties on the same day, and then interest wasn't clear. I don't know when you were supposed to start it, right?
Right.
Because since it's not due at the first of the month, it's due in the 20th of every month.
So what exactly are you asking for?
We're
then?
asking for you to change the code as suggested to, 1, bring it into compliance with state code, and 2, to clear up the penalty and interest as it's currently stated in our current code.
And Mr. Chair, members of the board, you would have to, in order to change the code, you would have to schedule this for a public hearing and adopt an ordinance at a regularly scheduled meeting.
Well, I think if it's going to make it simpler for both of you, I think that would be a no-brainer than to go that route with the public hearing. I mean, I don't see a problem with that if that's the way we got to do it. So, would we just need a consensus here to say let's move forward? Is that what we're looking at?
It's up to the pleasure of the board. That's fine with me, though.
So, Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
All right.
So my question is, what about fuel tax?
This doesn't address fuel tax at all. That's nothing. That's more. Are you talking like at the pump? Fuel tax is already calculated at the state level. It's not something that you have to deal with or have authority over.
Yeah, these 2 suggestions, recommendations, are just exclusively for transient occupancy taxes and meals tax. That's all they would be.
I saw another light on Mr. Steer.
Yeah, I'll turn it on. On a separate note, what is the status of our meal tax? I mean, are most of the restaurants on schedule? I know
Yes.
a couple of years ago we had a prominent restaurant that got pretty far behind schedule and stuff like that. But overall, you think everything's...
In general, we only have a few frequent flyers.
Yeah.
In general, they're paid on time and remitted on time, and we've tried to make the process as easy as possible. So for those that are seasonal businesses, they can just email a 0 receipt saying that we didn't operate for these months.
All right. Okay. That's good to know.
And that's at least on my side.
That's right, and a lot of them are the newer restaurants that are open and they're not really familiar with the process and trying to get everything straight with their opening routine and all. But yeah, for the most part, it's pretty good.
Yeah, occasionally a hiccup in the first few months,
Yep.
but we work with them on that, and it's goes forward from there.
All right, so general consensus of our board is to move forward with the public hearing in that process? All right. Thank you, Ms. Shimovic and Mr. Evelyn, for your time.
Thank you.
I only have one item. On Friday, I met with representatives of the Historic Commission, and they informed me of a project that they would like to undertake that would require some additional funding from the county. And what they've done is they have done an inventory of all the historical markers, roadside markers throughout the county. And they've identified, I believe, 32 that are in need of repair, and or need to be moved, or the surroundings has just covered it up with growth, so you can't see them. On Friday, they've requested that the board consider relocating 3 of the markers in the Lenexa area. Most of these markers are overgrown. I think some of them were installed back in the 30s and have had little maintenance since. What the request is that the board consider working with VDOT and undertaking the cost to establish a pull-off on side of the roadway. And per VDOT, we would have to undertake that cost to do so, and the permitting as well, so that the 3 historical markers in the Lenexa area could be bunched together at the pull-off. And they've given an example. I have a picture here what looks like something that was done on Cumberland Road that had a nice fence and 3 markers placed there. The reason I'm bringing this to you, in order to move forward with this, I would need some preliminary engineering done in order to apply for a land use permit, and I would hire one of our on-call consultants. But if this is something that's not the will of the board, then definitely I don't need to extend the time.
Mr. Chairman?
Yep.
I am a member of the Historic Commission Committee, and this has come up several times in our discussions. I think with the rich history that New Kent has, and we advertise that, that's part of our marketing as well, and it's almost insulting for us to claim to be historic and then not care about historic things. I think some of these markers were, it has been enlightening. There's absolutely no funding for anything to do with these historic markers. I don't even know how they end up getting put up sometimes, because the state doesn't have a funding mechanism. VDOT doesn't have a line item in their budget for historic marker maintenance or pull-offs or anything. It's basically when one is applied for and granted, it's up to VDOT to kind of figure out a place to stick a post in the ground, and it comes out of their maintenance budget. So there's really no funding mechanism for any of these. So you can see why the ones that are out there are in a state of disrepair, because nobody's really paying attention to them. There's no maintenance schedule for them. And I think it would be nice for them. They've already moved a couple of them in Lenexa, right in front of Liberty Baptist Church, and created a small pull-off there, which is convenient because it's a little spur road. It's not on 60. So I know the markers they're talking about now would be either, I know they had requested that we do something with the property that was there for the fire station, but I believe we're going to move forward with disposing of that. And, maybe down by the new fire station. And I'm not going to pretend to know where they need to go, but if we're going to have these markers, the purpose is for people to be able to pull off the road and read them and understand the context of where they are and what historically occurred there. So I would be in favor of us looking into, consolidating the pull-offs, so we're not trying to do 30 different pull-offs throughout the county, but if there's an area that we can consolidate some of them and still maintain the, historic context to them, I'd like to see us try to do something about it.
And the area down by the new fire station, actually, there's enough VDOT right-of-way to put all of this in that. The right-of-way along Route 60 is huge, and I understand when they were looking at building Interstate 64, they had started purchasing right-of-way along Route 60, and that's why it's so wide there. So we won't need to utilize any county property to do this. We can do it solely within the VDOT right-of-way, but unfortunately, VDOT will not pay for it. So. And I do have funding to proceed with the preliminary engineering work using our on-call consultant. Once that's done, I'll have a cost or estimate of what it would cost to actually build the pull-off. But if there's no interest, then I'd rather keep that preliminary engineering funding and use that for something else.
Well, if we have to do a pull-off, could we use CVTA funding to pay for that, to help pay for that if it's on a state highway, state road?
I think that might be a stretch for the purpose. That might be a stretch. Yeah.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
What about that money? Is that money still set aside for that roundabout on 612? I mean, we never did anything with that. We could never make that happen.
No,
Could you use that money for this?
No, because there was that was in a previous fiscal year.
Uh-oh.
So at the end of the fiscal year, that money just went back to our main fund. But in our budget, we have money set aside for professional services. You never know when we might need a survey done or something like that. So we keep a small amount of money for things like that.
Mr. Chairman, I'm okay with just looking into it to see what the cost would be. Of course, VDOT would have to permit it, right?
We would have to apply for a land use.
And I know that one of the gentlemen that met with you and I met with the VDOT superintendent, and he was not real enthused about it, to say the least. But
he wasn't.
No. But anyway, let him have a shot at it.
Okay.
Now, if I can just add, I think that's part of the problem is, there are some folks that are trying to bring some recognition to these markers, and VDOT has been non-existent. It's probably close to accurate as far as offering any assistance, and so that's why it's coming to us now. So
what about that village market? I.e., where Old Baltimore store was, it used to be a Townsville market there. Then there was Cumberland market.
VDOT has I think they still have it, a signage program, and I forgot what they call it, where they do identify those historical areas in the county.
Right there, White House. That's right.
Yeah, the green signs. I think if we can identify some that are missing and bring it to VDOT's attention, we can get those replaced. But I think it's going to take us bringing it to VDOT's attention to getting it replaced.
is there a way to maybe combine this effort? If there are certain markers in historic location markers, that could correspond with one another.
Yes, I think so.
Well, up there by the farmer's market, they got 3 historical markers at the pull-off.
Yeah, there was a Brown's Corner marker in that area.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if that sign is still up. That might be one we need to replace. Yeah. Yeah. But we can definitely look into that. Yeah. And identify those. Yep.
So we want to let Mr. Hathaway get the, okay. Mr. Hathaway, move forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else, Mr. Hathaway?
That's pretty much all
Mr. Chairman, I move to go into closed session pursuant to section 2.2-3711A1 of the Code of Virginia for discussion and consideration of a prospective candidates for appointment involving the county attorney position. Also move to go into closed session pursuant to section 2.2-3711A.3 of the Code of Virginia for discussion and consideration of the disposition of publicly held real property where discussion in an open meeting would adversely affect the bargaining position or negotiating strategy of the county involving a tenant of the New Kent Human Services Building. Amen.
Thank you, Mr. Steers. Ms. Watkins, would you poll the members, please?
Mr. Evelyn?
Aye.
Ms. Page? Mr. Steers?
Aye.
Mr. Lockwood?
Aye.
And Mr. Tiller?
Aye. We shouldn't have any further business when we come back into open session. Thank you.